In today's video, I'm going to talk about how to come across as a good listener, actually how to be a good listener, even when your facial expression tends to look like this. Now, to set up the problem, most people, in my experience, are pretty good at lining up their facial expression with the moment that they're in. This is why it can be kind of difficult if you don't tend to regulate your facial expressions in a way that's helpful. So if this is you, this video is for you. But it's particularly for you if you're actually a good listener, you really do care about what people are saying, you just tend to come across like you don't. So that might be for a lot of people, especially if you have ADHD and you need to look off and like maybe you zone out when you're paying attention, but if you have to make eye contact, it's actually like painful to you and you're not paying attention when you're making eye contact. If that's you, this is going to be really helpful. I would categorize my solutions in kind of two categories, or if it's easier for you, you can think of them as kind of step one and step two. Step one is to take a hint from Freud or therapy and remove your face entirely from the situation. Step two, or option number two, is to manage the moment and manage your facial expressions. So with those two set up, let's get into it. If you have a conception in your mind of therapy as something like this, where there's like a guy in a wingback chair and he's got a portrait type notebook and he's flipping through it and he's taking notes and the person is sitting on the couch and they're looking away from him, you have been influenced by a guy named Sigmund Freud, who early in the 20th century he just completely revolutionized how we think about therapy, is still very influential today. This video is not about him, but it is about a technique that he introduced, which was having his patients sit on a couch in front of him looking away from him. Why did he do this? He did this because he knew that when people are sharing things that are vulnerable or scary, they become hyper vigilant. Like they're watching the facial expressions of the people they're talking to like a hawk. And he didn't want to give away some indication that he was concerned or scared or having some other emotional reaction to what they were saying. So what he would do is place them on the couch, have them look away from him. Now, you might be thinking, there's no way I can do that in normal life. I'm not a therapist. I'm not trying to have people come to my house and sit on a couch while I talk to them. That's not what I'm suggesting. What I'm suggesting is there are ways to use this principle in everyday life. I'm going to give you two of my favorites, and I bet you have a third one or a fourth one or a 10th one. Drop them in the comments because I would really love to hear other ways that I could implement this, because I know that there's more than the two main ones that I use. Okay, the first is driving. Driving is probably my favorite for a number of reasons. When we're driving, we're both sitting side by side and we're facing ahead. When I'm riding, I'm often looking out the window. I'm looking ahead at where we're going. The driver is hopefully looking at the road and not looking at me. And so it's just perfect, right? And they're not staring at my facial expressions. I can zone out. I can look concerned. I can look however I want to look as they're talking, and it's not going to affect how much they share. So this is perfect. I really like it because it's practical. You can say, hey, I got to take a trip up the road. Do you want to ride with me if you wanted to talk with somebody? As opposed to, you may really not like coffee because we're just sitting there and you're staring at me. I don't like the eye contact. I don't like the hyper pressure. Go for a drive with somebody. The other reason I really like it is because of all the rapid eye movement, especially if you want to have a conversation and you're like, hey, let's just go for a drive and chat. You can go for that drive, go somewhere pretty, and their eyes are going to be moving all around. When we lived in Colorado, I loved going for a drive with my wife and talking because there was so much to look at. It kind of put me in a good headspace, and I wasn't hyper fixated on her. She wasn't hyper fixated on me. We could look all around, integrate what we were saying. And there's a lot of research around rapid eye movement and integrating thought. I'll put a link below to that if you want to do like a deep dive on that content. That's not where I'm an expert, but there's a lot of really good research around it. The second place that you can kind of have a Freud-esque conversation where they're not staring at your face is a campfire. So a campfire is great because one, there's just something hypnotic about a campfire, you know what I mean? Like you look at it, the flames are flickering. And then two, oftentimes it's at night and all of that visual stimuli is toned down. You're focused in on one thing. You can sit there and talk. I like the pacing of like a cigar or a pipe to just sit and like slowly move through something, and they're not fixated on me, but we are very connected like mentally and emotionally. If you have kids, you can do s'mores or something to interact with the fire. There's just a lot of options around a fire to have a deep conversation where somebody's not staring at me and demanding that my body indicate my reaction. Does that make sense? So that's my main category 1 of remove your face from the situation so that they're not hyper fixating on you. Now let's move to category number 2, or if you like, step number 2. So step number 2, or category number 2, is to manage the moment. Here's the thing. At some point, you're going to need to give somebody your undivided attention, both mentally and physically. And so you're going to need to sit in front of somebody and you're going to need to look them in the eyes and give off the impression that you're listening physically, which giving off the impression of listening and listening are different things. Here's the thing. You need to know yourself. You need to know how much energy that's going to take you. And if it's going to take a lot of energy, you need to mitigate the chances that that's going to happen to you over and over. So that's why we say step 2, because hopefully you're doing step 1 more. You're having more conversations in the car, more at a campfire, more at the other options that hopefully you've listed in the comments down below. And if you are, you can go into those moments knowing, okay, I'm about to see somebody that I haven't seen in a while. They're probably going to need my attention. You can set your intentions. Okay, when I go in, I'm going to need to really indicate to them that I'm listening. And sometimes, and I know that this is a hot take, communicating to the other person with your face and your body that you're listening may actually make you a worse listener. And sometimes giving off the impression of listening is going to be more important than actually listening, because perception is reality. And if you are forced to choose between looking like you're listening and actually listening, I would actually choose looking like you're listening. You can always circle up later and say, hey, I wanted to circle back to the thing we were talking about yesterday. I had some stuff on my mind and I really wanted to just pay better attention. And you can go for a drive, or you can sit at a fire and talk to them. Does that make sense? Kind of a hot take, but you can't get back a bad impression, but you can circle back and hear more about that thing that you didn't quite listen to. So manage the moment, manage your energy, know before you go in, all right, I'm going to need to manage this. And then the final thing I would say is learn to manage your facial expressions. I have a course that goes through a bunch of stuff on a conversation, and part of it is facial expression. And the 2 biggest indicators that somebody is open to you is eyebrows up and chin up. There's something about exposing that carotid artery that kind of says, hey, I'm a friend. And there's something about lifted eyes and open eyes that says, I'm very open to what you're saying. When we start to close off, we start to say, I'm scared of what you're saying. I'm scared of you. I'm concerned. We're enemies, we're foes. So do your best to be open to them, to be receptive. The second thing about your facial expression and communicating to somebody that you're listening is that don't have a blank stare. Even if you have a good facial expression, if it's static, it's like torture to the other person's psyche. And so do your best to give them little bits of information that let them know, I hear you, I'm listening. And this is as simple and as silly as, yeah. Okay. Laughing when it's appropriate. Give somebody cues that you're listening, verbally and visually. Don't just give them a static face. All right, that's it. We kept it short today. I hope that's helpful to you. If you tend to have a facial expression that doesn't communicate listening, you still can communicate to others that you're listening. You just need to be intentional. And we're all about focusing on what you can do, not on what other people should do. So if this kind of thing is helpful, you can click the subscribe button below and you'll get updated anytime I post a new video. Have a great week. You are known and loved. See you later.